Hello everyone and welcome to another hybrid episode because I don't know how to classify some of these things. Anyway, so, in nature, it's not too uncommon for an animal to migrate from one place to another. That's how most species got to where they are today. And there used to be several animals that were in places that were unthinkable today. I mean, lions used to live pretty much globally, but now they're only found in Africa and India. That's not a joke, by the way. India really does have lions. Look it up. And humans, which were originally only found in Africa, are now found all over the world. But sometimes an animal ends up in a place it's not supposed to be, and it causes a bit of a mess for the local ecosystem. And that is what we'll be talking about today. These are invasive species. Now, the big difference between an invasive species and an animal that's migrated is that usually animals that migrated to a new area are there either naturally because all their food was depleted and they had to go somewhere else, or they were taken there by chance, like how most island wildlife gets somewhere. But invasive species usually get to where they are because of human intervention and therefore are not naturally occurring in that location. So, without further ado, let's look at some of these invasive species. Also, this is going to be a bit different, as instead of talking about the animals as animals, I'm mostly going to be talking about the story of how they're an invasive species. Sound good? Good. Okay. Let's start with the cane toad, Rhinella marina. Native to South America, these toads are very toxic. Yep. Anyways, the cane toad had long been an animal imported for pest control, and it actually worked out pretty well, surprisingly enough, and didn't really have any bad consequences. However, in the 1930s, Australia decided to get in on this and imported a bunch of toads in order to take out the beetles eating sugar crops. However, unlike other pest control imports, this was a massive failure. For one, the toads couldn't actually eat the beetles since they lived on top of the sugarcane where the toads couldn't reach them. But most importantly, the toads started explosively breeding, and none of Australia's predators could do anything since they'd die if they ate the toads. So the toads quickly spread throughout the continent. This has had disastrous effects as predators are decreasing while their prey are increasing. Thanks to this toad. Next, here we have the northern snakehead, Channa argus. Native to North Asia, this fish is similar in size to the ones I talked about in my fierce freshwater fish video, but with one particularly nasty habit that makes them bad invasive species. During times of low water, the fish is actually able to crawl on land and move itself to another body of water. So yeah, that's one way to spread a species around. In 2002, people started finding the fish in the United States, which ended up there because of people importing the fish only to release them, because of course they did. Throughout the 2000s, there were reports all over the east coast of these fish ending up in ponds, eating the native fish, causing plenty of ecological damage. And like I said earlier, these fish can crawl on land to other bodies of water, so if they get through decimating one pond, they can just crawl to another. Great. Next, we got lionfish, genus Pterosis. That sounds like a skin condition. These fish, native to the Indian and Pacific Oceans, are rather visually striking with their brown stripes and long, thin fins, which are more or less stingers that inject venom into their enemies. In recent years, the lionfish has ended up in the Atlantic, usually dumped there by people who try to keep them as pets, but then they're like, oh no, this is too hard, so they just dump them in the ocean without considering where they're dumping them, because of course that happens. That always happens. People think they're ready for pets, and they're like, oh yeah, I can handle this, and then they're like, oh no, I can't actually handle this. Why are these pets so hard to care for? And then they just toss them out in the wild, because why not? Why not? Why not? I mean, who does research on pets beforehand? That's just silly. I'm just gonna impulse buy an animal. What could possibly go wrong? Now let's talk about Florida. As I mentioned in a few previous videos, something about this state just seems to attract people to dump animals there. And as such, this state is kind of an invasive species magnet. You got the Burmese pythons that kill alligators, green iguanas, monkeys that were brought there to film a movie, but then they escaped into the wild, so that's great. The cane toad, yeah, it's not just in Australia. Wild boars, giant African snails, and that one monitor lizard-like lizard that's not actually a monitor lizard that I mentioned I didn't want to give its own video, which eats native reptile eggs. Moral of the story, stop importing wild animals only to release them, especially if you have a valid breeding pair. Now let's look at the cards. You know, the Snakehead just looks off. I can't really explain how, and I don't know if it's worthy of a point deduction, but something about its appearance here just looks off in a way that's hard to explain. Like, it doesn't really look like a snakehead, in my opinion. Looks more like they just took a typical fish and gave it sharp teeth. I don't know, maybe I'm just crazy. What do you guys think? Should I deduct a point for its appearance? I don't know. As for the cane toad, it's given the wrong genus. It is no longer in the Bufo genus, it's in the Rhinella genus. So, 9 out of 10. You know, I do have to wonder why the lionfish is in Monsters of the Deep instead of Toxic Terrors, since the most famous thing about the lionfish is that it's venomous, but forget it. Oh, whatever. Unless it's objectively wrong, like the Hellbender, I can't really deduct a point for category inclusions. But what I can deduct a point for is that it only lists one species, even though lionfish is a genus. So, 9 out of 10. I don't really need to talk about human relations this time. I pretty much spent the entire episode talking about that. Humans are the reason these things are even mostly known about in the first place. So, yeah. I'm only now realizing that naming this thing Nightmares of the Deep is kind of a misnomer, or whatever you call something that's misnamed, since only one of these creatures is from Monsters of the Deep, but hey, that's life. Oh well. See you guys next time. Goodbye.